I'm just introducing myself. I'm Councillor Spencer Flower, leader of council, and I'll be chairing this meeting today. But colleagues, both cabinet and other members, if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please use RTS on the chat box so I can see who wants to speak. And as you know, I have a habit of allowing colleagues from across the chamber, if they want to speak after a report's been delivered prior to a debate, please indicate and I'll give you the opportunity to do so. So we got a number of I'm going to introduce the cabinet by simply saying all the cabinet are present today, and as and when cabinet members speak to an item, I ask them to introduce themselves the first time and say what their cabinet role is. And it's the same with officers. We've got a lot of officers here today for a whole host of very good reasons. So once again, I'm not going to go through all the names, but as and when they do have to speak for the first time, can they just say who they are and what their role in the council is? So Kate, apologies for absence.
Good morning, Chairman. Clerk to the committee. I have apologies from the Chief Executive and Teresa Levy, Executive Director.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of June. Are we all content with the minutes as presented? Can I sign them?
They're content.
Thank you very much. I'll do that when the opportunity arises. Not yet, I suspect. Declarations of interest. Any member got any declarations of interest they wish to declare? No. Right. Public participation. We've got a number of questions today, and Jonathan Mayer and another officer, either David McIntosh or John Selgrim, will share the job of going through the questions. Then individual cabinet members will come forward with an answer. So the first question is from Sarah James, Chief Executive of the Arts Development Company, and I think who's going to start? Are you starting, Jonathan?
Yes, I am, Chairman.
Good morning.
Jonathan Mayer, Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic. This is the question from Sarah James. Why is arts and culture not mentioned nor name-checked in the Council's economic growth strategy as a key industry contributing to Dorset and one which needs supporting through the recovery plans?
Thank you, Jonathan. Gary Suttle.
Thank you. It's Gary Suttle, Economic Growth and Skills Portfolio Holder. I welcome the question from Sarah James and acknowledge that arts and culture do have a role to play in the future prosperity of Dorset. And this will be acknowledged in the final strategy. The significance of arts and culture has been discussed during the development of the strategy, and they have a particular role to play in addressing crucial issues such as seasonality, bringing vibrancy to our towns and making Dorset an attractive inward investment proposition. Arts and culture have been severely impacted by COVID-19, and we must seek to recover and increase resilience to future economic shocks. These issues will be detailed further in the action plan to accompany the strategy, and we look forward to working with the Arts Development Company and other appropriate partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. There's a question now from Julianne Booker on behalf of Extinction Rebellion. Who's going to ask?
Chairman, it's John Selgren, Executive
Thank you,
Director
John.
for Place, and I'm going to read the question from Julianne Booker. When will Dorset Council's climate and ecological strategy include a fully costed and timetabled action plan?
Thank you, John. Ray Bryan.
Yes, I'm Councillor Ray Bryan, Cabinet Member for Highways, Travel and Environment. As included in the next section of the climate strategy, work is now taking place on a costed, detailed action plan, which will map out Dorset Council's journey to being carbon neutral by 2040 against the carbon budgeting set out in the strategy document on page 22. Our action plan will set out our objectives, specific detailed actions, who in Dorset Council will be responsible, timescales and performance measures. We will also include details of other key partners required to help deliver these actions, the scale of the potential carbon savings and associated co-benefits, health, economy, ecology and resilience. The action plan will be completed and presented to Dorset Council Cabinet in October 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. Now got a question from Len Herbert. I presume that's you, Jonathan, is it?
Morning, Leader. It's David McIntosh.
Oh, hello, David.
Hello. It's the Corporate Director for HR and OD, and I'll read the question from Mr. Herbert. And that is, so I asked Dorset Council what the next step is to communicate the climate and ecological emergency in a letter to all Dorset residents, businesses and institutions, telling the truth in a concise format about the crisis facing us and the actions we must take to avoid its worst implications.
Thank you, David. Ray Bryan?
Yes. The release of the draft strategy and public consultation will be comprehensively communicated by Dorset Council through a wide variety of channels, including social media, website and printed media. The climate change strategy forms the public-facing document and is a summary of all the full technical analysis found in the accompanying technical papers, which can be accessed using the links in the strategy. There are numerous images, diagrams and video links, along with a glossary and index to make sure the reading the document is as easy as possible, but which unenviably adds to the length of the overall document. The consultative questions will be clearly linked to the relevant sections of the strategy to make answering the questions as easy as possible. Each section of the public consultation document will contain an executive summary of the subject area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. We've now got a question from Michael Tunbridge.
Thank you,
Over to Jonathan.
Chairman, this is a question from Mr. Michael Tunbridge, who's concerned about investment by the Dorset Pension Fund in fossil fuels. And his question is, on 16th July 2020, Shropshire Council took the lead and called on the Shropshire County Pension Fund to divest from fossil fuels within 3 years, and they resolved to include fossil fuel investments in their carbon footprint accounting. Will Dorset Council take similar steps?
Thank you, Jonathan. Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chair. Peter Wharf, Deputy Leader and Vice Chair. I read this question out in my capacity as the Vice Chair of the Pensions Committee. The Chair of the Pensions Committee is Mr. Councillor Andy Canning, who has approved this response, as I do. The response is as follows. As you recognise in your question, the governance arrangements for the Dorset County Pension Fund are complex. While Dorset Council is the fund administrator, the Pension Fund Committee is made up of members from BCP, that's Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, and a staff representative, as well as Dorset councillors. We are conscious that both Dorset Council and BCP have declared a climate emergency, and I can assure you that the Pension Fund Committee will take this fully into account when it makes its investment decisions. The pension fund reviews its investment strategy every 3 years based on an independent actuarial analysis of our level of funding and any action that is required to meet any shortfall. This is followed by an independent evaluation of investment prospects, leading to recommendations concerning the fund's investment strategy. We will receive these recommendations in the next few weeks, and they will be discussed and agreed at our meeting on September the 10th. We have specifically requested that the independent evaluation includes an assessment of the merits of a decarbonisation strategy versus a fossil fuel free strategy. However, to further complicate matters, we are members of the Brunel Investment Partnership and are moving speedily to the transfer of all of our investments into their pooled funds. The Brunel Partnership is committed to leading the way on a sustainable investment, and it is achieving this by a commitment that its mainstream funds are in line with the targets set in the Paris Climate Accord, and, as a minimum, we will reduce their carbon footprint by 7% a year. The second point, launching a series of sustainable funds with low carbon footprints. The first of these, the Global Passive Low Carbon Fund, has a carbon footprint of around 50% compared to the MSCI World Index. Brunel will be launching 3 sustainable further funds in September, details of which will be presented to the committee at the meeting that I referred to some moments ago. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter. We've got a question now from Bridget Jocelyn.
Chairman, John Sargren, Executive Director for Place. I'm going to speak to this question. So the question asked by Bridget Jocelyn relates to item 15 on the agenda for this meeting, the draft Dorset Council Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy. Bridget Jocelyn's question is this: are the targets in that document ambitious enough?
I'll ask Ray Bryan to respond, please.
Yes. Dorset Council made it clear at the point at which it declared a climate and ecological emergency that its strategy to tackle this would be based upon informed and fully investigated actions against a realistic timetable that was achievable, set out against the financial pressures that are facing not just Dorset Council, but all local authorities. The carbon budgeting section of the strategy shows the progress towards carbon neutrality will bring about significant reductions in carbon emissions well in advance of the 2040 target. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ray. And we've got one of 2 questions from Dave Warren now. So question 1 from Dave Warren.
Thank you, Chairman. It's David McIntosh. Mr. Warren's first question has a preamble which is on the screen and available in public, and his question is, please could the Climate and Environmental Advisory Panel publish their findings and recommendations concerning the environmental and ecological effects of energy from waste incineration? Because if this is truly a forward-thinking document, it needs to advise on both current and potential future events that will impact on the county's ability to achieve its climate targets.
Thank you, David. Ray Bryan?
Yes, as part of any future waste treatment solution, a range of technologies and different solutions would be explored, taking into account environmental and ecological impact assessments, not just EFW. The results of this research and any future waste treatment solution would be publicly available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. We've got a second question from Dave Warren now. No? I've got 2 questions from Dave Warren on here. No?
Chairman, Jonathan Mayer, Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic. The second question from Mr. Warren again has a preamble which is on the screen.
Right.
His second question concerns energy from waste, and he asks the council to revisit their position on the future use of energy from waste as a method to manage Dorset's residual waste.
Thank you, Jonathan. Ray Bryan?
Yes, the joint municipal waste strategy for Dorset was adopted in 2008 and revised in 2017. This was prior to the Green List being developed and prior to the council declaring a climate change emergency. The joint municipal waste strategy for Dorset sets out the strategic direction for Dorset's waste up until 2033. However, it has already been updated and is due to be updated every 5 years, or if there's any significant change. A significant change in the waste industry is the government's Waste and Resources Strategy for England 2019. Therefore, any updated strategy during 2022 will take into account all of these local, national and international changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Again, I've got 2 questions from David Ridgewell. And the first one, please.
Chairman, John Sargren, Executive Director for Place. I'm going to read the first question from David Ridgewell. As members will see, there's some preamble to this in relation to specific bus routes. Mr. Ridgewell's first question is, how Dorset Council is going to ask the Department for Transport to fund the public transport strategy?
I'll ask Ray Bryan to respond, please.
Excuse me 1 second. I seem to have lost my response. Sorry about this, Chairman. Chairman, can we come back to this a little bit later?
Is the response on the screen? Is there a response on the screen or not?
No, Chairman.
No, okay.
Right, Chairman, I now have it. Sorry about that.
Okay,
Yep.
it's all right, Ray.
Yeah, public transport is a component of the response to the climate and ecological emergency and will be reviewed as part of the local transport plan and included in the Climate and Ecological Action Plan. Sorry about that delay.
That's okay. Now we've got a second question from David Redgewell.
Thank you, Chairman. It's David McIntosh, Corporate Director for HR and OD. Mr. Redgewell's second question relates to investment in rail infrastructure and makes reference in the preamble, which is on the screen, to access to Bristol, to disabled access at stations and the use of freight, amongst other things. And his question is, what bid is the Council making with the Western Gateway Transport Board to fund vital railway improvements and services in the plan?
Thank you, David. Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you for the question. As yet, there are no bidding opportunities via the Western Gateway Subnational Transport Body, better known as the SDB, for rail improvements. What we are doing is preparing a rail strategy with our partners in the SDB, which will put us in the right position to make the best case for investment in Dorset and set it within the regional context. Poor connectivity within Dorset is bad news for our neighbours as well as for us. We can then use this strategy as a basis for working with the rail industry and the Department for Transport to bring much needed investment in Dorset's railways. In addition to the Western Gateway strategy, we are also working with Network Rail on their continuous modular strategic plan for Dorset, which is addressing many of the issues you raise, such as the hourly service on the Heart of Wessex line. It aims to ascertain what is achievable and what needs to be done to make aspirations deliverable. It is anticipated this work will be completed by the end of the year. To respond on a couple of specifics in your lead-in, I understand from Network Rail that they intend to start constructing disabled access to the northbound platform at Dorchester West later this year, also using some access for all funding. Network Rail and South Western Railway will be providing step-free access to each platform, though not between, at Dorchester South Station. As regards Wareham Station, Dorset Council continued to work closely with train operating companies to provide a regular rail service between Swanage and Wareham. Dorset Coast Forum, in partnership with Dorset Council, has a successful bid to South Western Railway Customer and Communities Improvement Fund, which is being used as part of a package of improvements known as the Weymouth Station Gateway. Project more information can be found at the www.dorsetcoasthaveyoursay.co.uk. A press release about the consultation will be going out in the next couple of weeks. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. And the last question this morning, a public question from Luke Wakeling.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hang on, we haven't had the question yet.
Sorry.
Chairman Jonathan there, Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic. Question for Mr. Wakeling. Again, the full preamble is on the screen. His question concerns the availability of broadband in Dorset. What are you doing, and when will we see the results to bring the next generation of internet access, i.e. greater than 100 megabytes per second, to the residents of Dorset? What do you say to the young people of Dorset who are looking for jobs and opportunities in technology and think they need to leave our beautiful county to succeed?
Thank you very much, Jonathan. This is a topic that Peter's particularly interested in. So, Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you to Councillor Luke Wakeling, who put this question in for the previous cabinet but missed the deadline. So you are having your question answered now. Peter Wharf, portfolio holder for corporate development and change. Dorset Council recognises that the universal provision of superfast broadband is critical to the future economic and social prosperity of the county of Dorset. The Superfast Dorset programme provides gap funding state aid to build open access superfast broadband network in locations where the commercial market will not provide a solution. It has been working with BT Openreach over the past 5 years and has delivered access to superfast broadband to over 84,000 premises in the county and a host of related activity to ensure strategic benefits are realised. Access to superfast broadband in Dorset has grown from a pre-contract level of 77% to 96% superfast availability across the county. The starting The starting level of coverage represented the handoff point of commercial deployment in Dorset, beyond which gap funding with council, central government and Dorset LEP funding was necessary to fast track further network expansion. As Councillor Wakeling alludes to, the focus is moving on to building faster gigabit networks. The starting point for this is low in Dorset, in common with many predominantly rural counties. The national strategy was set out in July 2018 in Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review, and this concluded that the most effective way to deliver nationwide full fibre connectivity at pace is to promote competition and commercial investment where possible and intervene where necessary. This is a long-term agenda nationally and in Dorset. Many actions are particular to central government and relate to changes to the regulatory, Ofcom and taxation regimes to encourage greater investment. Specifically in Dorset, we are working with suppliers, big and small, to understand their commercial plans and see how we can support deployment through operating best practice in relation to street works. Excuse me. Facilitate network design and access to land, and to ensure that new build is provisioned with fibre. Our remaining contract with Openreach is now building exclusively full fibre in rural areas. Business and communities are able to access the rural gigabit voucher scheme, again subsidising connectivity at gigabit speeds. We are working with central government to understand the opportunity and likely impact of the gigabit outside-in programme, as it is called. It is too soon to know what the impact in Dorset of this £5 billion national programme will be, but it is clear that this intervention programme will be needed in large parts of Dorset where the market will not provide solutions alone. The first outcomes from this intervention are expected from 2022 onwards. However, it is worth noting that this programme is being designed for those areas where commercial investment is not likely to occur. We are currently in discussions with Chris Loder MP, who is working on our behalf and on behalf of all of the Dorset MPs to lobby for improved connectivity within government. Dorset Council recognises the importance of faster networks, and on this month's Cabinet agenda you will see items A, approving our economic strategy, which recognises digital infrastructure as a foundation for sustainable and inclusive economic growth, and B, seeking our own and Dorset LEP investment in full fibre infrastructure. Government's ambition is to complete a national rollout by 2025. This is recognised by industry as a really stretching target. By way of comparison, the Future Telecoms Infrastructure Review gave a completion date of 2033. If Councillor Wakeling would like more information or to delve deeper in relation to his own town or ward, Dougal Lockhart, the lead officer on broadband and mobile infrastructure, would be delighted to meet him virtually or otherwise to discuss further. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good, very comprehensive response, if I may say. Rob, we've got two statements. I know Cabinet have seen them, so I don't intend to get them read out. But I know that John Selgren wants to comment on the first one, from Paula.
Chairman John Selgren, Executive Director for Place. So the statement from Paula Conteschi, which you've got before you, is in relation to item 15 on the agenda for this meeting, the draft Dorset Council Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy, which is being discussed this morning for consideration for public consultation. Paul has made two specific points in relation to the text of the report, Chairman. The first in relation to the financial implications contained in the body of the report, and the second is in relation to the climate implications similarly contained in the body of the report. Further, she suggested two specific additions in relation to the background papers. Those relate to issues of energy and secondly in relation to waste.
Thank you very much, John. Right, we've now gone to agenda item 5, which is questions from members. We've got 4 questions, written questions today, and the first one's from John Andrews.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is, in Sherborne we have an up-and-coming problem in early years education with the possible loss and probable loss of 16 jobs and displacement of 72 nursery places. This will have an impact not only on the children but the ability of their parents to go back to work. The knock-on of which could be enormous for the local economy. Only someone with an extremely large crystal ball would have seen this coming up in the lift, and as a member of the EAP on the economy, I know as a group we didn't see it coming. What impact in growth in Dorset does the Cabinet see is possible with closures estimated at 25 to 30% in early years, 0 to 5 provisions? Also, can we lobby the Government Education Department for additional funding nationwide for early years provision, as this is one of the keys to regenerating our economy during this COVID crisis? Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Andrews. I'm Andrew Parry. I'm the Cabinet Member responsible for children, education and early health. In response to your question, John, within Children's Services, we have been working closely with all providers of early years education across Dorset. This comprises childminders, early years settings, which are commercial, community and governor-run in schools. We have a very positive relationship with the sector and maintain good communication. Dorset Council hold a statutory duty to provide sufficiency of early years provision in Dorset as a whole, but do not run this provision in all but 3 instances. To inform our work, we have surveyed providers in order to establish their long-term viability and whether they need additional support at this difficult time following the COVID infection. The Council, working with Schools Forum, has a reserve fund available to help support providers who are in short-term financial difficulty. At this time, we do not anticipate significant numbers of closures, but there is a need to support some providers. We will use funds available to make sure that we maintain our duty for sufficiency. The specific provision in Sherborne highlighted is being financially supported by both the Council, Sherborne Town Council and the associated Academy Trust in order to ensure as far as possible it remains open and available in families in the autumn. The Council is in ongoing discussions with the Academy Trust about securing long-term sustainable provision in the town. Clearly there is a longer-term issue which presents itself around the funding for early years practices, where these attract public funding. The rates of funding nationally are relatively low, and we would like to see this at a higher level. Across the country, the viability of many nursery providers is challenging at this time because of the recent COVID issues. This has exacerbated the underlying low funding issue. In Dorset, we are well placed to respond to the needs of the system in the short term and are actively engaged with providers. We will seek additional funding for places from central government. We recognise the importance of the sector in terms of not only providing for early years education, but also in their economic impact in the local community as employers and providers of childcare for working families. We are totally committed to ensuring sufficiency of provision in Dorset. In respect of lobbying government, I have briefed the leader about the situation, and with his agreement, we will be drafting a letter to government highlighting some of the variances we feel which are potentially undermining the sustainability of some of our settings.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We've now got a question from Councillor Paul Kimber. Are you with us, Paul? If not, I'll move on. We'll come back to Paul Kimber. Let's go on to Nick Ireland's question then. Morning, Nick.
Sorry, I was taking the time to unmute. Yes, thank you. It is noted that the Council does have reserves, some of which can be used as a short-term measure to balance the budget, but that longer-term use of reserves is not sustainable. It is also noted that unless additional government funding becomes available, the Council will have to manage this forecast overspend using its reserves, which consist of the General Fund reserve of £28 million, combined with other previously earmarked reserves, and that they are sufficient to enable the Council to continue to operate throughout the financial year 2021. Finally, it appears that the overspend in 1920 was met from the General Fund, but that some reserves have been rationalised and repurposed to put that back to £28 million. My concern is that not all reserves are designed to provide insurance or required indemnity against shortfalls. Some are there for specific purposes to support policies and aspirations of this Council, and once spent elsewhere may be lost forever. Also, given the current projected deficit of just over £43 million and a general reserve of £28 million, it implies an additional raid on our reserves to the tune of at least 15 million, assuming we're actually permitted to wipe out our general reserve completely. My two questions are therefore, which specific reserves were taken to support the financial year 1920? And the same question for those we intend to use to support the projected overspend in the financial year 2021, given that these must already be known from the assertion that they will enable us to be solvent for the rest of the financial year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'll ask Tony Ferrari, please, to respond.
Thank you. Tony Ferrari, portfolio holder for finance, commercial and assets. And Nick, you've just gone, because I was just going to compliment you on the white horse in the background behind you on your picture. It's a nice local advertising.
It is a bit, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you for the question. As you rightly identify, reserves will not resolve the financial strain put on the council by COVID-19. However, they do buy us the time to resolve the underlying issues. Similarly, you're correct that the forecast shortfall by the year end is 43.1 million, although this has a high degree of uncertainty. How quickly will our income return? How long will our extra cost last? We're already taking steps to reduce this figure, leaving Princess House and Allenview House being two examples, although the precise savings are still being worked through. As you rightly identify, we have a general reserve of 28 million. We anticipate a potentially significant contribution from this reserve. The latest round of government grant gave us just under 3 million. There's an income support scheme announced by government, but the details of which are not yet clear. Our estimate is that this could deliver a further 6 million. At this point, can I discuss a policy that I implemented under DCC, carried forward through the Shadow Authority and also at Dorset Council? Under each of these bodies, schools were allocated more money by their financing schemes than was supplied to us by government. All of these councils allocated money to support the school's income shortfall. There were choices about how this was treated in accounting terms. Many councils across the country allocated money and wrote off the debt at that point. Indeed, that policy was recommended to me by various councils along the way. Although administratively the tidiest option, I chose not to follow that route. In the interest of financial prudence, we allocated the money to the schools, but we kept the charge open and increased our allocated reserves every year as the charges accumulated. The basis for this decision was that if the government ever retrospectively resolved the situation, we would have a charge for them to settle. I must admit, even I didn't think this was a likely outcome and was occasionally tempted by the advice I received. However, I didn't take it, and that's exactly the policy the government selected. Effectively, they have taken the accumulated shortfall off our books and left us with the allocated reserve, which is now free for us to release into the general reserve. A long story, but it's made available a further £14.8 million of reserves. We've also recategorised a number of other earmarked reserves. For example, DWP reserves at 1.2 million, Treasury Management reserves at 5.2, Insurance reserves at 2.0 million, and Collection Fund Risk Reserve at 5.2 million. We're therefore confident that with some reduction of the gap from 43.1, we'll be able to manage the shortfall from our reserves and the current level of government support. And there's always the possibility of future government assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. And I got Brian Heatley.
Thank you, Chairman. I found Councillor Ferrari's last answer very reassuring. I want to talk about the two papers before the Cabinet today, one on economic growth strategy and the other one on climate and ecological emergency. I think we need to start the difficult conversation between them rather than simply assert, as the growth paper does, that they complement each other. We've got two aims, one of which I'll call preserving the planet so it continues to support human life and civilization, and the other long-term economic growth. That is part of our activities that fall within the definition of gross domestic product should grow. And I mean long-term, I'm not talking about recovery from the current pandemic. Are these two ideas compatible? Some say we can preserve the planet and continue to grow the economy as a whole. Others, including many environmentalists, say that we can only preserve the planet if the economy stops growing or even gets smaller. As you'd expect, I'm amongst the Greens. I'm very sceptical that we can both preserve the planet and have overall long-term economic growth, largely because the bigger the economy, the bigger are the flows of materials through it, and it's the physical flows of materials which damage the planet. But I'm a humble chap. I don't know this for sure. And equally, I would claim it's impossible for us to be sure that continued economic growth is actually possible. I'd suggest, therefore, that we don't have to have this argument. We can agree instead that we can grow those parts of the economy that are ecologically sustainable and reduce those parts that are not. And indeed, much of the detail of the economic strategy presented here actually takes that approach. We can be agnostic about whether the overall economy grows or not. If we adopt as a compromise this agnostic approach, we would as a consequence simply banish the idea of overall economic growth from our economic policy. We can still aim to have an economic strategy. We simply don't commit ourselves to an economic growth strategy. Now, Councillor Suttle is recommending you accept the economic growth strategy today, while Councillor Bryan is recommending that the climate change and ecology strategy should go out to public consultation. The economic growth strategy paper makes no reference to there having been a public consultation on that paper, though I accept some business groups have been consulted. So I get to my question. Why not repair the apparent omission of public consultation on the economic growth strategy and put both of the papers out for consultation together and add to that consultation asking the question, do we support overall growth? Are we think the economy as a whole ought to get smaller, or are we simply going to be agnostic about it as our longer term policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Gary Suttle.
Well, thank you, Brian, for the question. Well, there's sort of two questions in there, I think. So first is, are we arguing for economic growth that damages the planet? Well, economic growth has many facets, and the future plan will take into account the environment as a priority in any planned actions. And there are a number of areas in which the economy can be stimulated by investment in environmental projects. It's not a fact that economic growth has, by definition, a detrimental effect on the environment. This occurs where there is failure to consider the future of this planet. Dorset Council is committed to ensuring that this does not happen. I urge you to consider the positives of economic growth, to use it as a way in which it can improve the environment, whilst giving those who work and reside in Dorset improved wages and living conditions. Regarding consultation, we've consulted extensively over a considerable period, and we've discussed the outcomes at length in our EAP, and it's time for action now. Further delay cannot benefit those who need our help the most, particularly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact that this has had on the economy. People's income and livelihoods are under threat, and it's important that we agree the strategy today to enable us to have the tool to help and put in place the much needed action plans. It may be that further consultation is appropriate as those action plans take form, but continued delay now is not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. That's the end of the written questions from members. We move on to agenda item 6, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. You've got what you've got before you. There is another iteration, I believe, coming out around the 12th of August. But just in case anyone was wondering what we've done with the Climate Change Action Plan, it will be coming to Cabinet on the 6th of October, and that will be reflected in the updated forward plan in a couple of weeks' time, along with the Leisure Service review that we deferred by a couple of months, and also some initial draft budget looking, and also a medium-term financial plan. So they're all going to be in the next version, and they'll be coming to Cabinet on the 6th of October. So apart from me commenting about that, colleagues, can we accept the plan as it's presented?
Great.
Agreed. Thank you. No
Agreed.
dissent. I don't hear any. Right, we move on to items relating to COVID-19, and there's one item specifically, agenda item 7, digital infrastructure project to accelerate economic recovery from the impact of coronavirus pandemic. And I think I'm going to hand over to Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 or 3 things. The first is a minor amendment to the report. On page 25, there is a spreadsheet which lists a series of costs with a description and a note against them. And there is a 9934 max total capital programme value. And against that, it says funded from Dorset Council Transformation Fund. That should move down to the next horizontal set of boxes, which is 285,000 additional project management and admin costs of running these projects to March 2022. 25 it's on, Kate, page 25. Can you just go to page 25? Thank you. Stop, that's it. And that line that says funded from Dorset Council Transformation Fund needs to go down one next to the 285,000 line. I don't believe anybody would have been misled by it, but it is a change I'd like to make. Thank you, Chairman. What I'd like now to do is talk about really 3 things. The first is I'd like to talk about some contextual issues related to this report. The second is I'd like to go through the recommendations, and the third is I'd like to make a minor change. So the first is contextual, and I choose my words carefully on this. This is a well thought out project, especially considering the constrained time frame we've had to work with. However, its funding is dependent on the support of Dorset's LEP, and this causes me great concern given past history of funding for projects away from the main conurbation that is now covered by BCP. In terms of this particular bid, my understanding is that we've not made the first cut in their recommendations, which I am extremely disappointed in. And that's my understanding from the LEP there, but they have not yet delivered their findings. Too often, for whatever reason, Dorset has not had a fair share of LEP funding for projects which in many ways underpin our ambitions for Dorset. We will be seeking an urgent reassurance from the Dorset LEP that in future we will get a fair deal when we bring forward new projects as part of an ambitious plan to revitalise and expand the Dorset economy. Looking back at previous failures to obtain much needed funding, the impression is that all too often the LEP has favoured supporting projects in an already established parts, generally urban, of the county, rather than ensuring all areas get their fair share of opportunity, especially in the west, south and north of Dorset. Those particularly sharp amongst you will realise that the east of Dorset is not part of that. We appreciate it may be, but this isn't about taking easy short-term actions. It's about investing in the future and making sure Dorset's residents and less established business communities are given the support to modernise and adapt in an increasingly digital world. We must move away from a model that favours urban and penalises rural and less technically developed parts of the county. Whilst we obviously want to retain our beautiful county's character, we need to demonstrate to the people outside of Dorset that we are a viable and willing destination for new business and opportunities via investment in modern digital infrastructure. This is even more important than ever as we try to help our local economy recover from the pandemic and find new ways of working. We need to deal with the skills gap and lack of social mobility in some parts of Dorset, particularly the more rural areas. We must work to give our younger generation the opportunity to stay in Dorset and to raise a family if they wish to do so. This will only be possible if skilled, well-paid jobs are available, which is why inward capital investment into our local economy is so important. Before Dorset became a unitary council, we had a county council, 4 districts and borough councils, and they were much more fragmented than we are today. We're now a strong and developing unitary council with bold, ambitious plans for future economic development. What we now need is for Dorset's LEP to recognise this ambition and start to represent the Dorset Council area in a fair equitable, constructive and positive way. Accepting this bid would demonstrate a firm commitment to Dorset's digital infrastructure, and I hope the LEP now make the right choice. Dorset LEP has so far failed in this respect, and I call upon them to review and reevaluate their approach, adopting a more strategic and whole county approach in order that they may be seen to be fit for purpose moving forward. It remains, I now move on to the second part, it remains a fact that we do not know whether we've been allocated this funding, and we are extremely disappointed about it. Some of you will know the background, that these bids were produced as a result of a request from the Community Secretary of State. Ours was produced in 3 days. It is an excellent series of bids, and yet we've had no response over a period of time. In summary, and this is my second point, the paper to Cabinet and the associated business case to the LEP sets out 3 related threads. The first is an acceleration of the use of government vouchers through the funding of resources to coordinate activity with local communities at the parish level, engage deeply with suppliers and provide additional subsidy where the costs of delivery are too high. Dorset Council can now do this, funded by Superfast Capital Underspends and project resource from the Transformation Fund, and this in particular targets our most need households and businesses, otherwise known as our not spots, and is the immediate response that Dorset can take to offer solutions. And the amendment that I will be proposing is that the 285,000, which is listed, which you saw earlier, additional project management and admin cost of running these projects to March 22, which we have in our budget, is used. And this is not trying to cock a snook at the LEP, but we are responding quickly and appropriately where we can. My second point is a programme of subsidised full fibre spine built to over 150 buildings, mainly schools, which will reduce the commercial cost of extending networks into the community, provide a spine network which reduces the cost of delivering wireless to the hub sites, provide direct connectivity for those public services sites, as I said, predominantly schools, and offer the capability for providers to deliver small cell mobile transmission, including 5G. We are seeking approximately £5 million funding via the Dorset LEP for this activity. This is the extent of work that we can realistically deliver over 18 months, although it will be a stretch. There are clear procurement and delivery routes that we need to follow, and this is not the full extent of any work that we're required to do. The benefit to cost rate, the cost benefit ratios of this work is extremely strong. The wider context is the beginning of a medium 5 to 6 year major programme of full fibre build to get Dorset up from the current 4 to 5% full fibre penetration to 100% government target. And this will need significant commercial investment, access to the £5 billion government funded outside in programme, and this will not begin until 2022. The comparatively modest spend in my previous statement will create some more beneficial commercial conditions. I would point out that the gearing on this project as a whole is that we would be providing £1 million to match the other contributions, which would total 8.649 million. Anybody can see that the gearing of that is excellent, of which 5 million of that is the LEP. I urge the LEP to do something quickly and support Dorset Council. I recommend this proposal with a slight change, which is the change I talked about earlier. Chairman, I wonder if you call Dougal Lockhart, who is in charge of the Superfast broadband programme, in just for a minute to define in detail the 285,000 and what it will achieve. Thank you.
Yes, yes, indeed, Peter. That's a good call. Dougal, do you want to add to what Peter's been saying?
Yeah. Good morning, Chair. Not much to add to this at the moment, except
you're on mute, Dougal.
I'm on mute.
No, he isn't.
No,
I can hear him.
You got me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not much.
Still on mute, Dougal.
I think others can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Chairman? Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Chairman.
You're
still on mute, Dougal.
No, it's not. We can hear him.
What
we
happens
can all
when
hear
you're
him,
in charge
Peter.
of Superfast broadband?
Yeah.
We can all hear him, Peter. You're the only one who can't. You can't hear us either, can you?
Oh, I've got a thing on the chat line saying we can hear him.
Yeah, we can hear him, Peter.
Dougal, you carry on. I'm obviously not connected. Please carry on.
That's fine. Not much to add to what Councillor Wharf is saying, except that many councillors will be aware that over the last few months we have seen a real rise in our post boxes and our inboxes as a result of people having to work from home, having to live from home more, and being unable to access the broadband that they need and they deserve. This is what we think we can realistically achieve over 18 months, which is what this programme says it's going to do. We have procurement routes, and all we need is the funding to deliver and the resource to deliver. One of the consequences, simple project management triangles, to deliver something more quickly takes a little bit more resource, hence the £285,000 of revenue costs, which in other circumstances would feel a bit high. That's one reason. The second reason is that in order to maximise the outcome from the demand-led opportunity of using government funds subsidised further by our own funds, we think that requires a managed programme of us going parish by parish, community by community, and working with them and suppliers to develop schemes so we can maximise that outcome. We have a very good track record of this in Dorset already. In particular, we have a good track record of encouraging other suppliers into the market, as well as the incumbent and national supplier Openreach, and therefore we think this is also extremely important in creating a set of conditions that not only deliver some short-term benefit, but also places in a better position for the long-term challenge of digital infrastructure across Dorset. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Dougal. Peter, any last points, or can I open it up?
No, apologies for my headphone, which are now technically officially broken. So I'm now speaking without headphones. No, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay.
Although I hope people recognise the urgency of this proposal, and it will help, may I say, answer the questions from people like Councillor Luke Wakeling, etc. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter. So open the debate, colleagues. Anybody want to comment? Any of the Cabinet wish to comment on this paper? If not, I'm hearing silence. If not, I think it's. Can I just summarise by saying I think it's a really strong business case. It's an exciting project. I think the gearing, as Peter described, was really beneficial to Dorset, getting money into the county that we otherwise wouldn't have got. So, subject to the amendment that Peter put forward, can we agree?
Agree.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Now, I'm aware that Paul Kimber lost his signal and is now back with us. So I'm willing to go back to agenda item 5 and let Paul ask his question. So Paul Kimber.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Apologies that I lost my signal. I think the gremlins must be around on Portland today. My question is around the headlines in the Dorset Evening Echo last Saturday around the bypass around White Regis that has been possibly a goal for many years, and it really is to ask the council, have we any plans, or can you update us on any of this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Ray Bryan, I think you're going to respond to this question.
Yes, I am. I've just lubricated my throat, ready for the next session. The funding for new strategic roads must be sought from government either through the Road Investment Strategy, better known as RIS, or the Major Road Network, known as MRN Fund. We understand there is no money available for a new road scheme here in the current RIS period, which goes from 2020 to 2025. The government does not currently consider the A354 between Weymouth and Portland to be of significance because it did not accept our case for the route's inclusion in the major road network in 2018. Dorset Council will be working with local business communities to lobby government for infrastructure improvements for Dorset. The next time this network will be reviewed will be 2024, and there are no guarantees it will be included then. Government is very clear that new road schemes must be high value for money and unlock significant numbers of jobs and housing to deliver economic growth. As part of any bid to government must demonstrate that we have done all we can to improve the current transport network before bidding for funds for new roads. So we will be seeking funding from the LEP and other appropriate government sources for a series of related highways improvements along the A354 Dorchester, Weymouth to Portland corridor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ray. Right, we'll go back to the agenda proper now. Go back to agenda item 8, which is items identified by the Cabinet Forward Plan. And this item is the Transport Infrastructure Investment Fund. And Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In May this year, the government announced the local highway authorities funding allocation for 2021 through the newly created Transport Infrastructure Investment Fund. Incorporated into this fund is a combination of already confirmed annual highway maintenance and improvement funds for councils and the addition of 2 new funds, the Pothole Fund and the Challenge Fund. Dorset's confirmed annual capital funding for highways maintenance is 12.7 million and for highway improvements is 1.9 million. Dorset has also received an additional 9.1 million this year, which consists of 7.7 million from the Pothole Fund and 1.4 million from the Challenge Fund. The Pothole Fund will be focused on our network's worst defects. It will be used to accelerate our capital resurfacing programme, focused on some of Dorset's worst strategic roads, repair the most damaged minor roads where a significant proportion of our reactive defects are experienced, and to improve drainage. The Challenge Fund will be directed towards schemes which reduce community severance, reduce the impact of HGVs and make significant carbon savings in line with our climate strategy. These additional funds are welcomed as they will be used to address the capital investment proposals from the Highways Executive Advisory Panel, and can I thank them for all their help they've given me over the last year, and for which corporate investment would have been sought. The need for commitment to longer term revenue and capital funding of our highway assets from 2021-22 onwards remains in order to address the maintenance backlog resulting from years of government underinvestment in Dorset. Future investment strategies against all highway assets will be the subject of a review at future Highways EAP meetings and further recommendations to Cabinet. The recommendation is that the Cabinet approves the proposed spend allocation of the Transport Investment Fund, and I ask for support.
Thank you very much, Ray. Before I invite Cabinet colleagues to speak on the report, I've got a question from Brian Heatley. Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Many members will know that there is a road in my ward, Old Castle Road, where there has been a landslip towards the sea, and there is a recent consultant's report which says that there is a significant risk that the road will be damaged probably in the course of the next year and become impassable. Something like 100 houses are on the far side of the landslip, and this road at the moment is a cul-de-sac. So it is something that is worrying those residents very considerably. I'm inclined to put my question rather facetiously. Does this count as a pothole? Are some of these funds good news for the possibility of doing something about Old Castle Road?
Thank you, Brian. I'll put that question to Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brian. As you're probably aware, considerable time has been spent on this particular issue over the last 2 to 3 weeks, and we are now able to negotiate with the new landowner on the plans going forward. I can assure you that this is in my focus. It's in the focus of the full highways team, and we will be looking to resolve the issue. And of course, I will keep you fully informed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. Cabinet colleagues, any comments? No? Well, this is some more good news, isn't it? If I can just say that, I think it's really good news for Dorset. Money coming in from government to allow us to do some infrastructure work, as Ray very ably described. So can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Move on to agenda item 9 now, the approval of the Youth Justice Plan 2020-2021, and Councillor Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to present the annual report to today's Cabinet, which I'm pleased to confirm was reviewed and approved by the People's Scrutiny Committee under the chairmanship of Councillor Somper on the 20th of July 2020. The Youth Justice Service is one of our pan-Dorset services, and as the report illustrates, the significance of operating effectively on a multi-agency basis across the Dorset and BCP council areas. Whilst Cabinet will have noted that the overall rates of youth offending remain low in the Dorset Council area, it will not have escaped your notice the significance of speech and language needs of those young people referred to the Youth Offending Service, which is why enhancing educational engagement is clearly identified as an area of focus. Page 5 of the report sets out our strategic headlines for 2020-2021, which to summarise are: the numbers of first-time entrants, the rate of proven reoffending, overrepresentation and resettlement, child exploitation and youth violence, and education, training and employment. Chairman, I'm very pleased we are joined today by the report's author, David Webb, who along with myself will be happy to assist in answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Any comments from colleagues? Have we got Jane Somper with us this morning?
You have, Chairman.
Would you like to comment, Jane?
Perhaps after David Webb. Is David Webb going to speak?
You can do. Do you want, Andrew, do you want David to contribute to the report at this point, or just to answer questions?
As I said to the committee, scrutiny committee, I place on record in Cabinet as well my grateful thanks to David and his team for the amazing work that they do as a service, working with some children and young people with great need, and producing a very thorough report of which we've all had sight of.
Thank you, Andrew. Is David Webb with us this morning? Does he want to add anything at this stage?
Yes, good morning. I'm David Webb. I'm the manager of the Youth Offending Service. I don't have anything specific I wanted to add. I think the plan is hopefully comprehensive and identifies our key priorities. As Councillor Parry says, the rate of young people committing offences in Dorset is relatively low. We do, though, feel that we need to make further progress in reducing the rate of young people entering the justice system for the first time, to try to find alternative ways to deal with low-level offending. And we need to respond to the needs of our cohort, which include, as Councillor Parry says, speech and language needs, difficulties accessing education, training and employment, which are a big factor in whether or not a young person is likely to commit further offences, and also the risk of child exploitation and associated violence is a concern for us and something we are taking action to respond to.
Thank you very much, David, for all the work you've done on this. I've got a couple of colleagues who wish to ask the question. Paul Kimber, you're the first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David. This is really a thank you for all the work you're doing in this field. As I know, because I was a former sessional worker or volunteer with the youth offending, and I think it's important we as a council recognise all the work that goes on via volunteers and that are working, if you know, 7 days and nights a week within the service. So it's just really very much my question is, it's the recognition, and I understand the new areas that we're facing, such as county lines and those areas that we have to look after. So it's a big thank you from my area. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, I'm sure, on behalf of the others, for your kind words. David Taylor.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to let you know, this morning at between 9 and 10, there was a Chamber of Commerce breakfast meeting, and the LEP was presented to us about all the good work they were doing throughout the county. And I did actually raise 2 questions at them to say, where's the facts? And I'm getting a link sent through to me right now, and I'll share it on the board so you can see what they've been doing. I just wanted to inquire on that one.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Right, colleagues, the report before us. Any comments, or can we approve the justice plan?
Agreed.
Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 10, Dorset Council Economic Growth Strategy. Over to Gary Suttle.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Well, good morning. I have great pleasure in presenting the economic growth strategy. It's taken some time to bring to Cabinet, but to agree the document, it was important we took into consideration as many views and aspirations as possible. We've many to thank for hard work, David Walsh, John Selgren in particular, but so many other officers who attended the numerous consultation breakfast events, sacrificed their time to ensure that we listened to as many people as possible and consider the diverse responses from all corners of our Dorset Council area. I also thank the numerous groups who were kind enough to listen to me throughout Dorset. This is a strategy. It outlines what we consider to be the areas that are most important to ensure economic growth for Dorset. And as the document says, we have 6 foundations: digital, people and skills, business environment, innovation and ideas, place, transport infrastructure. This is not a plan detailing what we're going to do specifically in any particular place. That comes next. The action plans that come from this strategy will give the detail, and it's vital we start work on those straight away to give the council direction. This is a strategy for all. I thank all those who have been part of the EAP, a cross-party group who've inspired this document. Under the council, this group should stop now, and I agree that the EAP has served its purpose. But if we rebrand the group and call it the Economic Growth Delivery Board, or any palatable name, it would enable us to work cross-party to agree the way in which delivery is made. And taking Councillor Brian Heatley's questions, this would enable every party to input and agree the way forward. Maybe one of the questions is why do we need this? Why is this addressed? But if you look at Dorset, we have areas of deprivation, some of the worst wage levels, generations of people who've had no work. In Dorset, there are 20,000 businesses employ lower than the national average of numbers of people. We have only 1% of large business, and yet they employ 20% of our workforce. We need to ensure that they remain and are supported. And it's a disappointing statistics, but we will have 11,000 new jobs in Dorset by 2027, but most will be part-time. How can a family survive on a part-time wage? Why have we some of the worst social mobility statistics in the UK, including 2,800 children who live in workless homes? We need to give people the opportunity to have good jobs, well-paid jobs, to lead lives that give them enjoyment, not misery. And to be successful in our bids for funding and our aspirations, it's vital that the council as a whole works together to make our economy support those that need it most. Lastly, I touch on the fact that we have some barriers to anything we want to do. And these are specifically the digital infrastructure. Never more than now do we see the shortcomings of our digital infrastructure following COVID-19. 5% of Dorset has fibre. That's awful. It needs to be much, much more, and that's why I welcome the item 7 in the agenda today from Councillor Peter Wharf, in the hope that we will genuinely be able to increase that over the coming years. The other thing that may surprise you is power. I mean, we take it for granted that if we build anything at all, it'll have power, but don't rely on that. We don't have a sufficient capacity in Dorset for any large industrial buildings. We've got issues there. Even if we build housing, we couldn't guarantee right now to connect it to the grid or to have a lower supply. And this is a disaster for Dorset, and we've only now begun to address it. So it is one of our now priority areas. And lastly, the LEP, it's been touched on previously in the meeting, and this is the source of government funding, one of the conduits for us to get the money we need, and yet to date has not worked as well as we want. But in the future, we will increase our demand for funding considerably, and we will be looking to them to be strong with government and get the national funding that Dorset needs. I now put forward the recommendations in A and B for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary. I don't see any colleagues indicating they wish to speak or make a comment. I got Andrew Parry. So Andrew, you want to come on, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to welcome the recognition in the report on a couple of areas. One is the number of children in Dorset who are growing up in what is described as a workless household, and the pressures that will cause on the family environment in that respect, and the work that needs to be done in order to change that situation for them, to give them a better outcome. Because if we are going to be bold in trying to build confidence in social mobility and opportunity, then we must start by recognising the issue and understanding the severity of it. So I welcome that in the report. I would also like to highlight my concerns that post-COVID, we understand and we are seeing evidence of economic downturn and the impact that is having on the under 25s and their employment, many of whom have been engaged in things such as hospitality and retail trades, which have suffered terribly as a result of the lockdown period. And I understand that in terms of economic development, we're going to have to look to see how we can help them gain new employment opportunities and undertake training, because it's quite clear that the nature of our high streets is changing at quite a rapid pace, and we don't want anybody to be left behind if we can help it. We understand that economic growth is one of the biggest drivers in the reduction of levels of crime. We've seen that time and time again. Crime levels do increase, and particularly youth offending have that opportunity to increase when there is periods of economic downturn. And therefore, building a strong economy for Dorset should help our work in, for example, the youth offending service that we were hearing about earlier. And therefore, if I, from a children's services point of view, can assist in playing our role in the economic development of the county, please don't hesitate to let me know. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Got Laura Miller. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, just really wanted to echo Councillor Parry's points, but sort of through an adult and social care lens, really. I welcome this report, and I think, you know, I'm fully supportive of it. I think we're looking for opportunities for people who, you know, need something to do. They need to have value, they need to have worth. We're moving away from our kind of day centre model. We're moving into strength-based commissioning and supporting people to live, you know, to their full potential. And we can't do that without a strong economy. So I really welcome the fact that this report has been written in the round. Doesn't just talk about the money, doesn't just talk about the economy, but really recognises that we have the duty to provide opportunity, which goes down into every single area of what we do. We can't be healthy without a strong economy. So I really support this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. Ray Bryan.
Yes, thank you.
Can't hear you, Ray.
Sorry about that. I'm totally in support of the proposals. A couple of points that I would add to some of the concerns that Councillor Suttle has already raised. There's a lot of work that will need to be done on highways. There's lots of work that will need to be done to connect us better with rail. There's a lot of work that will need to be done to give us a public transport system that is improved. But I would add that, along with the supply of electricity, we have drainage problems that will need to be resolved. Some of our drainage systems are not even of this century, of previous centuries. More recently, I've come across cases where we have a water supply issue, and I think it's very important that we link this economic growth strategy along with the local plan that Councillor David Walsh is working on, of which I happen to be a member of that EAP. So this is all coming together at just the right time. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. Any other comments from colleagues, on the cabinet colleagues? No. Can I just say that Gary, you and the EAP have done a great job here, across party EAP, looking at the ambitions that we want for economic growth and prosperity in Dorset. Really good piece of work, and I hope that colleagues on the cabinet are able to support this growth strategy. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Move on to agenda item 11, redundancy multiplier. Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. The redundancy multiplier is what it says it is, and the predecessor councils had different redundancy multipliers. So in the lead up to what was called local government reorganisation, i.e. we moving to one single council, the Shadow Executive Committee resolved to harmonise the rates used by the predecessor council to 1.75 because there were different rates, and it would have been entirely inequitable for people to have different settlements when all other situations were the same. And it was agreed that this will be reviewed and likely reduced in October 2020. Now, that was done in the anticipation that the post-LGR restructuring of service areas would be completed by then, and that was the plan. However, we have been impacted very severely by the need for the council to respond to coronavirus in two quite different ways. The first way is that management attention has been taken away from organising the restructuring and remodelling to doing other things, quite rightly. And the second is that some staff have chosen to delay potentially moving in order to help out with jobs to address the coronavirus situation. So essentially, we've lost probably about 6 months and we're not out of the woods yet. Therefore, the recommendation before Cabinet today is to extend the use of the 1.75 multiplier until the end of March next year. And this would ensure parity between those who've already been subject to organisational change and those who are due to be at the risk of redundancy as we move forward through the remainder of the financial year. So the recommendation is simple, to delay any changes until until the new financial year in order to provide equity to our employees. Very happy to take questions, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Peter. Comments from colleagues? Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very
Agreed.
much. Move on to agenda item 12, Dorset Council Budget Q1 Financial Management Report. Tony Ferrari.
Thank you, Chair. This paper confirms much of what's already in the public domain about Dorset's financial position. Picking out some of the key points, last financial year we allocated just under £5 million to over budget expenditure, primarily to adults and children's social care. There was a small COVID-19 impact, but this was much more than covered by the first tranche of the government's grants. However, the pandemic impacted enormously on Q1 this year. I've spoken on many occasions about the £43.1 million shortfall we face. The answer to Councillor Ireland's question preempted many of the comments I'd intended to make at this point about how we are handling it. So looking forwards, we're developing 3 layers of financial response. In the short term, wherever there is action we can take, we will. For example, we ended the leases on buildings, as mentioned in my answer, and we've rolled back much of the capital programme to address a smaller number of key projects. We're also developing a more nuanced model of the COVID-19 related costs. Some are once-off, non-recurring items. For example, we do not believe we'll have to deliver an excess debt facility again. However, some will be part of our new business as usual. We think it unlikely that all of our increased social care costs will return to their pre-COVID-19 levels. This exercise will allow us to identify what our expenditure will need to be next financial year. But it's already clear that there will be a financial gap which will need to be closed. So at the same time, we need to model options to do this. We can seek to increase income or reduce our purchase costs or reduce our operational costs. It's likely there will be a need to be contributions from all three. What we must not do is to overreact. We do not know exactly what gap we will need to close, but equally, delay has a price. Every day a saving is not made. To achieve the same savings, more need to be made subsequently. This is a difficult balance to strike, and it will underpin the extremely challenging budget that we must set for 21-22. But the paper explains the position at the end of Q1, and I'd welcome any comments or questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tony. Apart from a couple of Cabinet colleagues, I don't see any other colleagues wishing to speak on this. So I will move on to Laura Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I have turned my camera on. Excellent. I just wanted to really set a little bit of context and give a few examples of the kind of pressures that we're facing in adults, because obviously the pandemic did provide its own set of challenges, but some of those things have changed permanently. And also just to give a quick update about some of the things that we're doing to try to mitigate. So we set the 2021 budget in November based on a number of placements, packages open at that point in time, their projected costs. We assumed a 5.6 increase to cover increasing costs and the complexity, and that's a big one. We made assumptions on the turnover of people that would need support, and we assumed achievement of £2 million savings in year. We also did a projection of the numbers of young people transitioning into adult social care and the average cost of that. So despite the uplift to our budget in adult social care, our consultancy that did a review for us, Empower, identified that the savings needed within year would need to be between 2 and 4 million. So that was challenging. We had plans in place to deliver a transformation programme that would start to address the gaps in our resources, and then we had COVID-19. So I think one of the things that was really key in our pressures was that we had national COVID-19 hospital discharge service requirements, and that required key changes in the hospital discharge procedures. So when people were clinically safe to be discharged from an acute hospital, that had to happen within 2 hours. And all of those discharges were led by the acute and community health providers and not social care. So that's resulted in around 180 people being discharged into residential or nursing care beds who are either self-funders or people who would, some but not all, be the funding responsibility of the CCG. So people subject to continuing healthcare or joint funding. So those additional 180 placements are now on our system so that we can track them. We can scope the likelihood and percentage of costs that might come our way when the emergency period is deemed to have been ceased by government. So that's contributing to the increased pressure against our purchasing budget, a small number of very high cost packages and direct payments. And also you won't be surprised to sadly hear that increased numbers of people with mental health needs who are requiring support. We've also got more complex cases. So we've got increased requests for double up care, and that's where you have 2 people visiting to care. And that would indicate that continuing healthcare should apply and therefore be funded by the NHS. But at the moment, clinical commissioning groups are not doing continuing healthcare assessments, so that pressure is falling on us. We're also seeing an impact with capital drops, where self-funders have been placed by the hospitals in very expensive residential placements to keep the flow out of hospital. So they're funded by NHS COVID monies, but when that ends, their personal capital will drop quicker than it would normally. So we then have a duty to fund that. So we have to work very carefully with those people. We have done a lot of work by our performance teams with finance and commissioning to have a robust activity performance and financial dashboard. Some of that was paused between March and June, but we've started that again. We've got a structured budget reporting. And I have to say that a lot of the transformation work that we were doing has been accelerated by the COVID pandemic. Clearly, we wouldn't have wished to have a pandemic, but a lot of our transformation work has been accelerated by that. And I think that's really, really helpful. We hope that we will be in a positive position going forward. But I just wanted to give you just a sort of some of our challenges that we specifically are facing at the moment as a result of the pandemic. Thank you.
Spencer.
You're on mute, Spencer.
Sorry, I turned it off to check whether it was me heavy breathing, and it wasn't. So Andrew Parry.
Thank you, Spencer. It wasn't me either. I just want to take a moment to kind of look at that balance between the outcomes we want for children and young people versus the resources we have available, and how we've been using things such as certain amount of capital funding input to pump prime what we hope will be a reduction on pressures inside the revenue budgets. And we've seen certain evidence of that, and some of it at quite a pace. So the new Children's Hub approval that we achieved, which required a lot of working across the council, and I'm very pleased that we also enjoyed considerable cross-council political support for this as well, has put that very much on the path to delivery. We know that, for example, as a council, we still have a duty to recruit more in-house foster carers and in-county foster carers as well. We had the very good news that the government has supported the funding of a new special school, and further details of that will be announced very shortly, I hope, which is a really good thing for us to achieve. Because if we can look after their needs in a locality that is easier for us to manage and have sight of, there are clearly better outcomes for the children themselves, as well as a reduced revenue budget pressure for the local authority. We are working closer with our schools on the delivery of inclusion and that culture of inclusion, because if we can keep children in those educational settings, we already know that the costs to the authority and pressures of the revenue budgets are greatly reduced. They won't be finding themselves in specialist educational units, which do come at a premium. We've also taken the time to look at what we've learned through the COVID lockdown period and how we've embraced certain technologies. And the byproduct of that, as Laura suggested earlier when she spoke, was that actually we found smarter ways of doing things, which we can do going forward, which will result in things like less travel, which has an associated cost, which also therefore helps with our ambitions to reduce our carbon footprint. So there's a number of measures that actually are coming through the system, which we are confident will have an effect on reducing those revenue budget pressures. But, and here is the critical but, we do recognise that when it comes to things such as secure accommodation for those children and young people in greatest need, that comes at a very significant premium, and there is a nationwide shortage of it. And we need to be mindful of that when we're setting budgets going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Any other colleagues wish to comment? If not, we've got the recommendation set out in 6 parts. Can we agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Tony, it's still you. You're going to talk about additional procurement forward plan report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a process cabinet requirement rather than a decision. This paper seeks approval to start a process of evaluating call-off frameworks for a variety of products and services for the council. It isn't a decision, it just allows officers to start work on these procurement processes, and I commend it to Cabinet to allow the work to start. Thank you.
I think that's straightforward enough, colleagues. We all agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 14, the Community Infrastructure Levy Governance Arrangements. David Walsh.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. My name is David Walsh, and I'm pleased to be portfolio holder for planning at Dorset Council. Members, you don't need me to tell you how imperative it is that supporting infrastructure appropriate with development is key to ensuring there are sustainable integrated spatial plans for housing, infrastructure, employment and the environment at our towns, suburbs and rural area. Now, you don't need me to tell you, because your constituents tell you at every opportunity they have, at a town or parish council meeting or in the supermarkets whilst you're getting your shopping. As we all know, SIL is one of the 3 mechanisms by which new development can contribute to funding for the infrastructure needed to support it. Others obviously being Section 106 and 278 highways prerequisites. The latest amendments to the SIL regulations give councils greater flexibility over the identification of infrastructure priorities, and these are very relevant to Dorset Council as a unitary authority. Prior to LGR, all Dorset district councils apart from North Dorset introduced SIL between 2014 and 2017, and it is now proposed to develop a single charging schedule for Dorset Council in parallel with the Dorset Council local plan to be in place by 2023. Since LGR, Dorset Council has become the SIL charging authority rather than 4 separate areas, which has simplified matters. Though there are 4 charging schedules and 4 Regulation 123 lists, each corresponding to the former district areas. North Dorset, relying solely on Section 106 agreements, are a different consideration, and this will be reviewed when we bring in a single charging schedule by 2023. The purpose of the report today is to agree the arrangements for spending SIL collected before and after the 1st of September 2019, when government regulations changed in relation to the needs for councils to set out what they intended to spend SIL money on. The report recommends that SIL monies demanded up to the 31st of August 2019 are spent on the priorities identified by the sovereign councils through their respective Regulation 123 priority lists, retaining the spending geography of each charging area. The report also recommends a process for the prioritisation and spend of infrastructure after the 31st of August 2019. This process involves the establishment of an annual scrutiny and allocation process. Existing governance bodies, such as Property Management Group, PMG, and Capital Strategy and Asset Management Group, CSAMG, would be used to consider projects and make recommendations to Dorset Council Cabinet. The accompanying appendices set out some headline figure for SIL money demanded and collected, as well as a prioritisation matrix. When SIL was originally introduced, it was to incentivise town and parishes to bring forward development in their areas, possibly through neighbourhood planning. And so consequently, regarding neighbourhood portions, stakeholders, including statutory bodies and voluntary organisations, need to be aware of the availability of SIL funding, which may be available towards appropriate infrastructure provision. And I'm hoping that all members here will be pushing this through their town and parish councils to get all of these stakeholders involved, because the spend must come through them. The biggest word here is local. This has to be local, local benefit, local spend. Consequently, for communities without a made neighbourhood plan, 15% of SIL receipts are passed twice a year to those parish councils where development has taken place, to be spent on local priorities, capped to a maximum of £100 index linked per existing council tax dwelling. Communities with a made neighbourhood plan, or in an area where there is a neighbourhood development order, will receive 25% of the levy revenues arising from the development that takes place in their area. This amount will not be subject to a maximum limit. Unparished areas will still benefit from the relevant neighbourhood portion. However, in line with government guidance, the charging authority will retain the SIL receipts and consult and engage with the community where development has taken place to establish how to spend the neighbourhood funding. 5% of the total amount of SIL collected in that year will be applied to administration expenses. In line with government guidance, any unspent funds at that end of the year from the administration portion will be treated as general funds. It is proposed that application of SIL funds to projects should remain as identified and prioritised as 1. Receipts demanded to the 31st of August 2019 by type and percentage. 2. Receipts demanded post 1st of September 2019, reassessed having regard to more up-to-date needs, including these specified in Appendix D. Chairman, this paper went before the Place Scrutiny Committee on the 23rd of this month, and I would like to thank its chairman, supported by Democratic Services, for publishing the extract from minutes of that Place Scrutiny minute so promptly, now forming part of your background material. The response from its members was very positive, and whilst considering issues arising from the report, it was thought that the proposals provided the right balance of councillor involvement and officer delegation. The committee picked up our deliberate mistake at Appendix A. The SIL prioritisation scoring matrix was incorrect at category wider community benefits and implications, where the scores were round the wrong way. The appendix has been amended as necessary. And so, Mr. Chairman, I would like to propose the recommendations as laid out in your paper with the amendment to Appendix A. Before you open that up for discussion, Chairman, can I invite the Chairman of Place, Councillor Darrell Turner, for any of his comments? Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Darrell, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I've got no real comments other than what David's already spoken about. I think at 10.5 and 10.6, it shows importance, financial importance to councils with neighbourhood plans. And I'd like to recommend, obviously, neighbourhood plans for, as a way forward in the future. Otherwise, I'm content with the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darrell. Comments from others? Any other colleagues? If not, I'll just say my thanks to Scrutiny for a thoroughly good job. It was done. We had to get it done, and we got it here before Cabinet today, so really useful contribution. So, colleagues, can we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
We now move on to agenda item 15, the draft Dorset Council Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy, which is going out for public consultation. Ray Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman. Back in May 2019, one of the first actions the newly formed Dorset Council was to declare a climate emergency, acknowledging that the council needs to act on the causes and impacts of climate change. In November 2019, this was updated to a climate and ecological emergency, so that the protection and enhancement of Dorset's natural environment and wildlife biodiversity is also considered in our climate emergency mitigation work. During the period, I've received a fair number of criticisms for the time this has taken to bring to Cabinet. At a very early age, my father taught me to get things right first time, and he told me that if you think twice and act once, you normally win. This has been my strategy throughout my business life. I'd like to take a few seconds just to highlight some of the work that has gone on behind the scenes whilst we've been forming this strategy. An additional 684,000 square metres of DC highway verge and open space were put into cut and collect management in the 2019-2020 period. This method increases the ecological value and reduces carbon footprint of maintenance. An additional 19 hectares of land was brought into the management of DC for ecological improvement and public recreation and well-being in 2019-2020. This land will less intensively managed, improving ecological value and carbon sequestration potential. The low carbon Dorset project has been running since 2018, but in recent times we've been inundated with applications for help. So far, we've received over 350 applications for support. We've provided over 12 hours support to over 89 organisations, mostly SMEs. We've awarded 80 grants worth 2.05 million. We're levering an additional 3.08 million investment in low carbon projects across Dorset, including BCP, giving a total of 5.14 million of investment. These projects give an annual carbon reduction of 3,700 tonnes of CO2 in Dorset. The installation of 3.23 megawatt of renewable energy capacity in Dorset. Improvements in the energy efficiency of 55 houses in Dorset. The development of 3 new low carbon products in Dorset. The reduction of energy used in public sector buildings by 317,000 kilowatt each year. Let me give you a few examples of the work that we've done. Riversmeet, a community-run leisure centre in Gillingham, were awarded a grant of 130,000 to help them completely redesign their pool heating and air handling systems to be much more energy efficient. The grant also helped pay for LED lighting and water and energy saving aerated shower heads. Combined, these measures will save an estimated 195 tonnes of CO2 a year. This is only the second site in Dorset where this novel approach to energy management is being trialled. And the hope is that these centres will demonstrate the savings that can be made both in carbon and in costs, and will be replicated across the county and preferably the country. We gave a grant to a company called Stewart's & Sons, who are Dorset-based garden centres. We awarded them $275,000 to help reduce the carbon footprint of 2 of their main garden centres. The money helped for pay for thermal screens and ground source heat pumps for their new state-of-the-art glasshouses, and solar PV rooftop arrays and LED lighting at both sites. These measures will save 449 tonnes of CO2 a year and around 50,000 in electricity costs a year, which will be reinvested in the business to help support their ambition plans for the coming year and obviously help our economic growth. There's a company called Barker's, a Dorset-based, the largest domestic laundry in the UK, and a leading specialist dry cleaner. We awarded them a grant of $25,000 to help them invest in various new equipment and laundry-efficient technology. The new gas-fired water heating system that the grant helped pay for will enable Barker's to change from their steam method, by which they currently heat water, reducing their use and reliance on fossil fuels by an impressive 50%. I could name a number of other areas where we have made substantial or given substantial help to both businesses and the community. The strategy you have in front of you brings together a considerable amount of work made more challenging due to a lack of comparable data as a result of local government reorganisation, where we brought 6 councils together and then had to put all this information into a single bucket. The strategy was finalised during the COVID-19 lockdown era, when we have seen just what can be achieved when society pulls together behind an emergency situation, and what positive change can occur when unilateral effort is focused on a shared outcome. The positive impacts of climate and ecological change brought about by the lockdown period, global CO2 emissions dropped by approximately 17% to levels not seen since 2006. In Dorset, the significant drop in road traffic brought about by an estimated 27% in carbon emissions. This shows us as a society what is possible in a short term when business as usual is adjusted. We must not lose some of these gains and rush back to how things were before the pandemic. The ambitions and actions set out in this strategy must be viewed alongside the financial pressures that are facing not just Dorset Council, but all local authorities, exacerbated by the current time by the additional pressures brought about by Dorset Council's response to COVID-19 pandemic. While this strategy illustrates it will be possible to tackle low-hanging fruit and combine carbon-reducing actions with other priorities, placing climate change response at the front and centre of our wider priorities. There will still be a need for imaginative and innovative solutions, working in partnership with central government and the many partners that we have along the Dorset Council's area. Before I finish, I must give my thanks to Matt Reeks, Anthony Littlechild and Wendy Carmichael, who have given their all in producing this strategy. I am proud to put my name against such a great piece of work. I give my thanks also to Scrutiny Committee, who at short notice brought this to their committee and discussed it with openness and frankness. This strategy now needs to be fully discussed by our residents, and so the recommendation before us is to approve the draft Dorset Council Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy for consultation with the public following the development of a costed delivery plan. Dorset Council declared a climate and emergency and established a councillor-led EAP responsible for gathering information and working with officers to make recommendations to Dorset Council's Cabinet on actions that will help mitigate against climate change. Can I ask for the Cabinet's support on passing this recommendation? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Ray. Before I open it up to Cabinet, Daryl, do you want to add anything? Daryl Turner?
Yeah, if I could please, Chairman. We have in front of us an excellent strategy document, excellent technical papers, but we do need a delivery plan as soon as possible, as Ray's already mentioned. We also need obviously ownership of each element of that plan in the future. I'd like to say we also continue to work forward to be a carbon neutral council. This doesn't stop because we haven't got those papers and won't have those papers finalised until next year. Ray's already given us great examples of what we do, and we will continue to do, and I think that's important. There were 3 other elements actually within the minutes of the scrutiny paper, as well as the obviously main recommendation Ray has read out. We did ask that scrutiny be consulted before the consultation document goes out to the public, so we can have a look at that, and probably part of the EAP meeting where that is discussed. The other item was to obviously continue to lobby government for improved policy and funding. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. Most of the changes in carbon emissions will come from government policy. Obviously, to continue to lobby government for national planning policy changes at a pace. Most policy changes take forever to get into place. We need these to move forward as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. Thank you to you in the Scrutiny Committee for the hard work you've done on this. It was a late reaction, but really helpful and grateful. I'm sure Ray's very grateful for that. Cabinet colleagues.
Chairman, before you move forward, can I just come back on a couple of points that Darrell's raised, because they are very, very important. It's absolutely right that scrutiny should have a say in the formation of the consultative document, and I'm only too pleased to welcome the input from scrutiny. We will be inviting them to one of the EAP meetings when we have the paperwork prepared, and also confirming to Darrell and the scrutiny team who worked very well on this that it is very much at the forefront that we need to talk to government both on funding but also on the actions they need to take nationally. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Thank you for adding to that. Laura Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to thank Ray and the teams in the panel, really, because I think this is an excellent document, and I think that there can be no doubt that everybody's.
Thanks. I had the jacket on a minute ago.
All right, David. Okay, yeah. I just think that this paper and this recommendation to Cabinet demonstrates the commitment that we have as an authority. And I wanted to share something that we visited a project recently as part of the Building Better Lives scheme in Wareham, and we have relocatable housing there. And the idea of that is to use a site as it's coming forward for development for temporary housing for people. Perhaps a lot of those units are fully accessible, and a lot of those units are for people who may have been sofa surfing or homeless in some way. And this links very much into this, because there was a decision taken along the way that we would each unit would have its own photovoltaic panels on the roof, but more importantly would have its own electricity supply going into a sort of big grey box with all of the electricity supplies in it. And that interests me because within the delivery plan, when this comes through, what I really would love to see, and I'm sure we will, is that trickle down effect, because what that meant was that each individual unit, which are going to be filled shortly, people are going to be moving in shortly, has the chance to have its own electricity supply. So people can come in having been homeless and start to build their credit rating, but more importantly, their own electricity is going to be cheaper because we've chosen to put PV panels on there. So I think if we can see that very real, drip down of this policy into actual tangible things, then I think that would be a brilliant thing. And thank you to everybody who's produced this, because I think it's great, and I think I wholly support it going out to consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. Tony Alford.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thoroughly support the document that has been produced, a first-class piece of work. In particular, I just want to congratulate all those who've been involved with the technical background papers, because there is a real sense of valuable information there, and really crucial to our knowledge and helping us shape our policy looking forward. So I really want to give thanks to all the authors of those technical papers for the work that they've done.
Thank you very much, Tony. Peter Wharf.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 or 3 things. Councillor Ray Bryan congratulates some of the officers who've helped produce this report, and I support that. Can I just comment on the chairmanship of Ray Bryan himself? I've been a member of the EAP, and it's been incredibly challenging. Some might say even occasionally intimidating. There's been a huge workload. He's had a few other things to do as well. And he's absolutely right. We've got to not be pushed into doing things so quickly that they're not of the right quality. More haste, less speed. I think this is an excellent piece of work. I think in the light of circumstances, it's been produced incredibly quickly. And I think we need to recognise above all that this is not a single Dorset Council will solve the problem. Everybody has a responsibility to play, and we need to be careful that we avoid these people saying, what are you doing about it? Because like Kennedy, ask not what your country does for you, ask what you do for your country. And everybody has a role to play in this, and we need to bear that in mind at all times. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and well said. Any other comments from colleagues? What I would like to do, therefore, is echo everything that's been said about the work of the officers. Great piece of work. I think it demonstrates yet again that having EAPs to flesh out policy, cross-party involvement is a very great benefit to us forming policy going forward. And Darryl comments about pace, and he's absolutely right. This isn't the only area that we've got to put pace behind. We've got to do a lot more of that going forward as a council. So really, yes, I hope you can we all agree that we go out to consultation?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Good piece of work. Agenda item 16, Ray, is there any need for you to comment on this?
I think I've spoken enough this morning, Chairman, so I'm perfectly happy to leave the report that I've just given as in place of this item on the agenda.
I think you've adequately covered an update on where we are. And can I just again personally echo what Peter said, my thanks, and I'm sure I speak for all your colleagues. Great piece of work. You've worked very hard, I know you have, sometimes under trying circumstances, but we're going forward with this now, and it's a very soundly based strategy. And now we need to, as Darryl again and others have said, let's get this action plan forward and let's get on with the job. Right, members, the next item is urgent business, and there isn't any. So I'm going to go into exempt business. Can I have a proposer, please?
Yes, Chairman, I'll propose that we move into exempt business with the appropriate words to do so.
Yes,
Seconded.
thank you, Peter. Seconded. So for the benefit of the public and any others that are with us, we're going to go into exempt business now because an item on the agenda which we might be disclosing information that would be sensitive. So I'm going to close this part of the meeting and ask the Cabinet colleagues and any other member to reappear on the exempt link. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.